Hello, my name is Jonathan Hoy, and today I will show you how to interface your Xbox 360 controller with MATLAB. Before we begin, there's a couple things we need to cover with the initial setup. Obviously, you need to plug in your controller. Also, it's important to make sure that the USB driver for your controller is properly installed. To do this, go to Control Panel, then go to the Hardware and Sound tab, and then finally go to Devices and Printers. Once there, right-click on the Xbox controller symbol, and then that should take you to a pop-up menu. Now you're going to want to click on Game Controller Settings, and from Game Controller Settings you're going to want to click on the Properties button. Once there, it'll take you into kind of a test setup for the Xbox 360 controller. So fiddle around with the buttons, and if data starts showing up on the screen, then the driver is working properly. Required and recommended software. I would definitely download a copy of the Microsoft Windows SDK, and also I would get Visual Studio Express 2012 or 2013. Also get the DirectX SDK, and then finally make sure that you've downloaded the .NET Framework 3.5 or greater. Here is a button reference, if you will, to tell you what the field names will be to which button it goes to. So that way when you see button.x, you know where x is, for example. Now here is a little code snippet from my demo code that I posted on GitHub. Now if you look, the first thing I do is I add the namespace into MATLAB. Now this is very important because this will now allow me to call all my API functions from within MATLAB. Once I've done that, I create an instance of my Xbox 360 controller and call it my controller. Once this is done, I then start polling my controller for data. I then use one of my special subfunctions to parse out the state of the buttons, and then all that data will be displayed to the console. Looking at it in more detail, this state object that I've pulled from my controller will contain the property called packet number and gamepad. Now, packet number will tell you if basically exactly that, what packet this came from, but more importantly, if a packet number stays the same, you know that nothing has changed in terms of pulling data from the controller. So if I'm not touching my controller, the packet number will not change. So like if you press a button, that will instantly change the packet number, and it could trigger something like an event, like pause a menu, or stop your robot from moving, etc. Gamepad is where all that data will be stored when you pulled the controller. So looking at that structure in more detail, you see that all the information, like your trigger, like how much you're pulling on your trigger, the left thumb number, even things like trigger threshold and dead zone. Now, the left and right trigger will range from 0 to 255, basically an 8-bit unsigned integer, and then your thumb range will be a 32, or I should say a 16-bit signed integer, and that'll tell you, it'll help you to determine what quadrant your stick is in, and that can help you when it comes to determining how you want to go about manipulating that data. Dead zone is important because you will notice that your stick will never perfectly center, so you can manually create your own code. I would manually specify in the code that if the left thumb or right thumb value is within a certain margin, that it basically counts as 0 to account for this dead zone offset, if you will. I had to create a special subfunction to parse out the buttons. This is kind of extra details that aren't really that important, but essentially go on to github.com, grab a copy of my demo code, And basically, if you press the left or right trigger buttons, you'll get vibration feedback from the controller. And I would also encourage you to visit sharpdx.org. They do a wonderful job with other things besides just X input, but they also have manage DirectX. I know that for many of you that's not really that important, but nonetheless, I would check them out. They have documentation for their APIs, and you might find yourself in the future wanting to get more .NET APIs for use on your project. And I think that an API like this one would be a great place to start. Here's what the sample code will output to your screen once you run it. And as you can see, it'll output all the data from the controller onto the screen. I encourage you to take this code, hack it up, do whatever you want with it. It would be great to see lots of Arduino projects, for instance, that you can control your robot using MATLAB and an Xbox controller. I think that would be awesome. Before I end, I just want to wish you guys a happy time coding. And as always, if you have any questions, just let me know on Google+, YouTube, send me a comment, however you want to do. And good luck.